Why do you think it's still radical to talk about periods in 2025?
I think that as a society, we just don't create a lot of space for that dialogue. I think that things are changing. There's nothing wrong with nature, and the way that our bodies are built are beautiful. I think that we really see the power of bringing these circles of women together and letting women share their stories. It's very likely that somebody else is going to say, oh, that exact same thing happened to me and I solved it this way. You have your friends and you have people that are your family that are there for you, that help you in that journey, but not giving up that belief in yourself is always, I think, the most important thing.
Hello, and thank you today for joining us with Emily Ewell, who is the CEO and co-founder of Pantys, which I learned was the first menstrual underwear company to be a B-Corp recognized as well, which is absolutely amazing. So thank you for joining us today to talk about all of these very feminine things that we deal with in our daily lives. So I really appreciate you being here today.
Well, thanks so much, Catherine. It's a pleasure to be here with you and share a little bit about our journey.
I was curious about how you are breaking this taboo that we have around something which is so natural and happens to women from a very young age to middle age. And Panties has helped spark a global conversation around menstruation. And I was wondering, when did you realize that it wasn't just a product, it was a movement that you were
Mhm.
making?
No, that's such a good question. I think, obviously, when we launched the brand in 2017, we knew that it's a market that's a little bit taboo. Even in our launch, kind of PR actions, we noticed that some of the journalists were nervous about talking about menstruation,
Yeah,
especially the male journalists. So it's very interesting. I think that rationally, we understood that our product brings more comfort, quality of life, that it's more sustainable. Just when we look at Brazil, for example, which is our main market, we have 15 billion menstrual pads that are disposed of every year. So it's a
wow.
huge environmental impact that we can deliver. But I don't think we realized when we launched how much our product actually changes people's lives, and in a very tangible and a very intimate way. So think about a month or 2 months after we launched, we started receiving these emails from customers, and we have kind of those transactional emails that say, oh, your order's been delivered, or even the review request. And we started getting these like multi-paragraph texts back
Wow.
from women explaining that they always suffered, some type of either discomfort or allergies, or even just that negative association with that time of the month, and that
Right.
our product brought so much more comfort and a sense of security to them, that they said that for me, it felt like I wasn't even menstruating, that I was just using underwear like it was a normal day, and I didn't feel like there was anything different. And so I feel like that's where you start to understand, you have this aha moment where you're like, okay, if a day on your period can be just like any normal day, you're really
Right.
empowering the girl, whether she's in middle school or high school, or the woman when she's working. You're empowering these women to have such a different experience with their own bodies, and kind of re-significant, like create a new meaning for what it means to be menstruating. So
Yeah.
I think that's when we realized it's a bigger deal. It's in more of a lifestyle, and has a much bigger potential even for impact.
Because I feel like when you are menstruating, you have to plan, there's actions you have to take, right? To plan around making sure that you have everything that you need when you go out. Or if you don't, then you're in this crisis mode that upsets your whole day. But your product makes it so that you can just live your life normally.
Exactly. Exactly.
And
And I
that's
think,
amazing.
yeah, no, I mean, that's something that maybe wasn't so obvious to us, that especially when you're an entrepreneur, you're looking at the data, you're looking at the market size, you're looking at the customer feedback. But this is something that's so much more subtle and kind of in between the lines of like, Yeah, like you said, you can just live your life. And I think a lot of people don't realize how much women adapt, not just physically, but psychologically on their period. And,
Hmm.
you think like, okay, I put in my tampon at 8, and then so
Right.
10:30, when I'm in the middle of this meeting, I have to remember to like see how
Right.
I'm feeling. And like,
Yeah. No,
and that's
exactly.
women already have a lot that they're dealing with in terms of work schedules and personal, and especially for women who are mothers or have, a family that they're taking care of at any level. I think that, menstruation is one other thing to think about. So if we can help reduce that, it's a huge impact.
Why do you think it's still radical to talk about periods in 2025? I mean, it's been going on for thousands of years, right? Why is it still a radical conversation, do you think, to have?
So that's such an interesting question. I think I didn't realize how taboo this space was until we entered it. And I think, I'm an engineer, worked for years in consulting, worked in the pharmaceutical industry. So always was surrounded by predominantly male environments. And
Hmm.
I think I never really thought about my period and how it impacted my mood or my energy levels or,
Right.
and I think that as a society, we just don't create a lot of space for that dialogue. I think that things are changing. And, even within couples now in Gen Z, we know that there's a lot more conversation and openness about periods and menstruation that probably 2 generations ago never, ever would have
Right.
happened. And so that evolution is happening. But it's so interesting because when we started launching in the Galeries Lafayette in France, and we started working with Selfridges in London, we started interacting with other regions of the world and, more talking to teams and kind of opening up about menstruation. And it was so fascinating because a lot of them say like, oh, well, I'm sure in Brazil, where people are so much more comfortable with their bodies, that menstruation is not so taboo. And so I'm thinking, okay, I'm the American thinking that the Europeans are so progressive, where
Right.
gender equality is like 10 times ahead of Brazil. And they're looking at Brazil thinking, oh, their people are so much more body positive. That so everywhere people think it's more taboo where they are, like
Huh.
for whatever
Yeah.
reason, which is super interesting. And it was not something that we really understood, how even in very progressive countries where there's a lot of policies in place for gender equality or even access to menstrual products, it's still very socially taboo. And not a lot of people talk about it either in their homes or in their immediate families or in as a couple. And so I think that that's when you start, start to have those conversations in people's homes and in their personal lives, and you can think of ways to trigger that dialogue. I
Hmm.
think that that's what really makes it less taboo. But what you said, I mean, half the population menstruates or will menstruate at some point in their
Right.
in their lives, so it should be something very normal. Yeah.
And one of the things that I heard about you, and I don't know much about this particular venue, but you were making your panties for trans as
Mhm.
well. And
Yes.
that is one of the most beautiful things I think that I have heard because we so often leave out that piece when we think about menstruation and how you do that. And how did you come up with that idea? How did you think about it? What led to that moment of creation for you all?
No, that's a great question. I think that we've always had a very inclusive kind of perspective on innovation. But I think we're also, as a digitally native brand, we're very connected with our customers, very connected with our social media communities online. And
Hmm.
so almost every innovation that we've created is a customer driven innovation.
That's
So we really like to, yeah, no, and it's so interesting because when you look at big consumer companies, they really struggle to have consumer centric innovation. But as a smaller startup, that's kind of where we have a huge competitive advantage, is that we're so connected with our community that we want to solve real problems of real people. We
Yeah.
don't want to innovate just to innovate and create PR and marketing around it, because what's the point of doing that? And so all of our innovations have come from requests from the community. So one of our first ones was we started receiving requests from nursing mothers who were using disposable pads that you put in your nursing bras. And they said, why can't you use this technology, the same or something similar from the
Yeah.
underwear in the nursing bras? So we've created the first absorbent leak-proof nursing bra in the world
Oh, wow.
from the question from our community. So we actually invited people who asked us that or said, oh, that's a great idea. And it was a really interesting launch for us because we not only invited a group of both influencers, but also real consumers to test our pilot products. And so they were actually had their hands, involved in making and designing the product. But we brought them a group together to do the campaign. And it's the first time we didn't use models for a photo campaign. And now we've done many campaigns with using real customers. But it was super interesting because we had a dialogue during the campaign where they said, like, oh, have you ever imagined trying to put a menstrual pad in a box or in a brief? It's almost impossible. And so
Yeah.
they were
Yeah.
saying that it's something that and that's where empathy comes from, right? Like, it's just that mental exercise of trying to imagine something and then realizing how ridiculous that is. And you realize, like, okay, if I can make something that creates a huge gap or a huge impact, even if it's 1% or 0.1% of the population, we're going to do that instead of creating something that's like a marginal incremental improvement that maybe solves the problem a little bit better than what other people have. So basically we brought a solution to the market for a community that didn't have any adequate solutions
Yeah.
today. So and it was one of the best launches we had as a brand. I think that both in terms of our social media community, PR and media really got behind it as a very powerful launch. So
Well, it's,
yeah, it
it's
was
also educating, I think, to everyone when when you launch a product like that, for a community that is often marginalized, um, and one that I feel like I'm friends with a lot of, trans, and I'm friends with, a large, all different segments of people, but I never thought about such a personal piece to it. And I think, you talk about body literacy as power, and you're big into health education as a form of empowerment. And I was
Mhm.
wondering, what do you think we're still not taught about our own bodies? Like, what do you like when you teach, when you're trying to, broaden education in this, what points do you really focus on with the community?
So I think for women's health, there's a lot of areas. And if you look at the data, so 70% of prescription medications in the US today have never been tested on women in a clinical trial. And that is because before 1996, it was not required that medication be tested on women. And so what happened is the pharmaceutical industry, especially because women have menstrual cycles and they
Yeah.
saw that variability in hormones as another variable, they said, well, let's test on men because there's a better chance the drug will get approved
Oh my
because we're
gosh.
not really adding another variable. And this
Yeah.
is true. This is like hard science that what happened. And it wasn't until 1996 where they said we have to start testing on women because a lot of like heart medication is proven that it's worse for women than men because it was optimized for male populations
Yeah.
and it was not the woman's body was not even put into consideration. So the medical model until 30 years ago wasn't really looking at the female body at all, and our hormonal changes, which are real science. It's not woo-woo science that women have these hormonal cycles every
Right.
month
Right.
and go through menopause, which is now like the new taboo and
Yeah.
kind of like we make the same mistake with menstruation where almost half of every girl that menstruates doesn't even know, they think they're dying or something, especially in developing countries. And then we make the same mistake with menopause, where women start to see the symptoms and they don't even know that they're symptoms. They don't know
Right.
that they're associated with. And so there's a lot that we focus on as a brand for education, and even for the broader population. I mean, nutrition. I think
Right.
there's some things that we should be learning in school where you just think, it's such a basic education on, what does the body need to be healthy and to be efficient. And, there's a lot of politics that go into that. We have these waves of like protein is everything and then dairy is everything. And so there's a lot of politics also behind the information that we get. But I do think that brands in the private sector can have a really powerful piece in helping bringing, people's real stories and what has worked for them. So even 3 weeks ago, I was in Japan doing a workshop on cycle syncing, so on the hormonal cycles for women and how to optimize your energy and even your professional schedule with your menstrual cycle. And it was so interesting because there were so many women that came up afterwards to say, oh, I had endometriosis for 15 years before I was diagnosed. Or someone else that was really, as an executive, going through horrible menopause symptoms, and her doctors couldn't figure out how to, and she found a nurse that worked with her who had the same symptoms, who solved her own problem, who could then solve her problem. And so this is a reoccurring theme that, we need to bring women together. And the more that we have these communities and create that information sharing, because our physicians are just not equipped with the
Right.
information to be able to help us through a lot of different scenarios. And my body is different than your body is different than, but for sure there's 1,000 or 100,000 more Emilys out there that will have the same situation that I do.
Yeah.
And yeah, no women should have to suffer, right? And so I think that we really see the power of bringing these circles of women together and letting women share their stories. It's very likely that somebody else is going to say, oh, that exact same thing happened to me and I solved it this way. And then maybe that will solve the problem for them. So
I think, and I agree with you. I think it has to be the private sector that stands up, not maybe not unfortunately, but it is,
yeah.
because my dad's a physician, my brother-in-law is a physician, and they were talking about how they spend 1 week on nutrition. And they were at one of the best hospitals in the world learning this, right? And they
Mm-hmm.
spent 1 week on nutrition,
Oh
which
my
is
God.
like the core of keeping your body healthy and avoiding having to do, a lot of heart medicine, a lot of times heart medicines or cholesterol or, all of these things. Um, so it is definitely, an area that's lacking with the people that we count on to
Yeah.
teach us about this. Um, and then I was thinking about the fact that, going along with the education, um, you're a brand with a mission as well. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just a product, you are the first B-Corp in the menstrual underwear. And it's not just a label, it's like a commitment that you
Mm-hmm.
all make. And how do you keep it so that sustainability isn't just a trend for you
Mm-hmm.
all, but an actual principle? Because now it is trendy to say things are sustainable and all of that, but it's like a core principle for you all. And how do you
Yeah.
keep that focus? And how did it even become a focus for you
Yeah.
all?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that impact was something that was really built into kind of the architecture of the business and the concept, even when we, from day one, started. I think it's very rare to find a product that directly creates both environmental and social impact.
Yeah.
And so we launched the business with that kind of triple bottom line view of, okay, we know that per person that uses our product, we're going to have an increase in health metrics, quality of life, sense of security. We have data in our clinical studies that we did on improving sleep quality, for example, improving productivity during the day. So that would be kind of like the social impact metrics just from using the product. And on the environmental side, reducing up to 15,000 disposable or single-use products per woman if she makes that switch 100%. So
Yeah.
if we think about in customer acquisition, we acquire the customer, we can directly create that impact per customer that's engaged. In addition to purchasing customers or clients that purchase our product, donations is the second way that we reach people. And so we do a lot of donations to help with menstrual poverty. And the thing is that creates not just the social impact of providing access to menstrual products and better gender equality, which comes through that, but it also creates the environmental impact. And so it's very hard. Some companies, they say, oh, this is a social impact business or this is an environmental business. And we're kind of both, which
Yeah.
is really interesting. But I'm a firm believer, and I do talks about this specifically, but that when you stop to think about businesses as being just optimizing for financial performance, and you start to define that as value creation, not just financially, but socially and environmentally, when you open that up, you create like a three-dimensional perspective of value creation. You can actually redefine how you innovate as a company. So I don't think about just innovating on a financial pillar. I think about innovating in three dimensions: financially, socially, and environmentally.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where it becomes really interesting, because a lot of businesses want to grow, they want to innovate. But if you're looking at the world from just one dimension, you're really limiting the amount of value you can create as a business.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that shift of, creating value versus just making money,
Yeah.
obviously as a business, you have to make money too,
Right.
but looking at it as a value, I think that's been a mindset that has really helped us as a company innovate, very quickly, bring a lot of new products to the market that never existed. And also position the brand, like you said, as more of a mission and a cause versus just a brand that has nice products, if that makes sense.
It does. But it makes me wonder too about you being a female founder launching a product about menstruation. And when you were bringing this before people, it's hard enough for women to get money, right? We know that's like this
Yes.
tiny percentage of women founders who, raise capital. Were you underestimated, do you think, in when you went before people? Or, how did you go about this being in such a male-centric world in this
Yeah.
space, being a woman talking about such a feminine piece?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think, as I always worked in these kind of more male dominated environments, I never really thought about that glass ceiling for women. And I never really felt like I was perceived differently or judged differently because of my gender. But I think as an entrepreneur, I definitely saw that in a very different lens. And so, we launched the business bootstrapped. We're actually bootstrapped until today. So that's a very unusual
Oh,
situation.
wow.
But
Yeah.
thankfully, we're a growing and profitable company. So in the end, we didn't have to raise funds, but we did in the first 6 months or so start talking to some funds. At that time, we had already had a very strong launch. We had opened our first physical store, so we had gone from e-commerce to omni-channel, and we had some really difficult conversations where it was very clear that they were looking for our male counterpart. And we even had a fund from Latin America tell us, oh, that was a great presentation and all this stuff. But, I just want to give you one feedback, that our data shows that if you have a male business partner, that you'll have a better statistically a chance of succeeding. And I
Oh,
was
wow.
like, is that really true? I was like, I think the data shows that the 4% of female startups actually have better financial returns and earlier exits. but they just didn't want to hear that. And
Yeah.
so it's just, yeah, and at that point you just think, well, thank God we didn't take money from this person. You just think
Right.
that the last thing that you want to do is become business partners with someone that you really don't think has, your best interest in mind.
Right.
So I do think that it's still, being an entrepreneur and the startup community is still a space that's very difficult for women. And thankfully, I think that those experiences gave us maybe a little bit of anger, but also maybe
Motivating.
to like really focus on, let's build an amazing business, and let's
Yeah.
like make it as profitable as we can, and let's, really be successful, because we maybe won't be able to depend on other people to help us with this, at least not at this time.
Yeah.
And I think my business partner is a woman as well. And so two female founders in a very feminine space, I think that put us kind of in this very outliers category of, it looked very niche maybe to some investors, but like you said, half the population menstruates, and it's not a small market. So
Yeah.
thankfully we stayed focused and made it a success case for us, but hopefully for some other women out there, so that, we can try to change that and get, funds really excited and open to the fact that there's huge markets there, and that, women are amazing leaders and tend to be better at decision making, thinking about risk and
Yeah.
things. So
Yeah. No, there's this wonderful woman, Amanda Elam, who talks about a lot of data around women entrepreneurs and their success rates compared to men a lot of times, and their ability to make decisions and work as a team and all of these things, and it's just amazing how that somehow doesn't always translate over to getting funding
yes.
and that piece. But I think my last question for you, and I think because I have a 9-year-old who's right on the cusp of, right, all of these changes beginning, is what advice would you give to yourself if you were not, 9, 12 years old, about periods and, your power of your own body, and, you didn't ask permission to lead, you just took it. Um,
Mhm.
so what advice would you give yourself at that age, thinking about all of these things?
So I have an 11-year-old daughter. So I think that
Okay.
that's a great question. And thinking about the next generation, I think I would say believe in yourself and listen to yourself. I think that it's even going in, whether it's periods and going into your first menstruation or your menstrual cycle, like there's nothing wrong with nature, and the way that our bodies are built are beautiful. And if you think about, we women are the source of creation,
Yeah.
and so that is a superpower, and we need to recognize that more. And I think that, coming from thousands of years of patriarchal societies, like we don't recognize that as much as we should.
Hmm.
And I think that there is a wisdom and intuition and a strength that comes from being a woman that is very powerful in business and very powerful in leadership. And I think that if we're not tapping into that, we're missing a part of our essence that we can really bring to the world. So I think just, trying to encourage, I think especially adolescence comes with a lot of self-doubt and a lot of
Yeah.
self-judgment. And I think that just being accepting and being open and trusting yourself and believing in yourself. And even as an entrepreneur, I think there is a lot of self-doubt, whether you're a man or a woman, in
Yeah.
leading a business and making decisions, and are we doing the right thing, and are we going the right direction? And I think that, obviously you have your mentors and you have your friends and you have, people that are your family that are there for you, that help you in that journey. But not giving up that belief in yourself is always, I think, the most important thing.
That I will relay some of that to my daughter as well, who
Oh,
is, going through the whole shorts and TikTok type, not that she's allowed on it, but the videos and all of that. And they are teaching so many different things on those platforms, but not those lessons that I think are the most impactful for girls or women or really anyone to focus on. So thank you again, Emily, for joining us today. I really enjoyed it. I think that not to promote the product, but what you're doing is just so beautiful and empowering and accepting and creating a space where women can feel the most themselves, I think, and comfortable in their own bodies, which is something that we tend to struggle with, not just on our cycle, but in general.
that's
Yeah.
yeah.
So at least creating a space where we can struggle a little less and feel a little more comfortable is a really great thing. So I so appreciate you joining me today.
Oh, Catherine, it's been such a pleasure. I really love the conversation, and hopefully we can think about a next generation where women are more empowered and struggle less. I think that's a
Yeah,
great way of looking at it. So you can count on us to be a part of that.
I will definitely be following you all on all of your socials. So thank you again and have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks.